I spent months building a guest house with my own money, trusting my parents' promise. The day it was ready, they gave it to my sister. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just left. By the weekend, they were begging me to come back. I spent 2 years saving every spare dollar I could. Skipped vacations. Picked up extra shifts. Said no to takeout so many times I started dreaming about pad thai. All of it went toward building a tiny home in my parents' backyard in northern Arizona. Not just a shed. Not some camper trailer. A real livable guest house with a kitchen, a bathroom, heating, AC, the whole deal. It was my plan B. Plan A was buying a condo, but I did the math and laughed myself out of that fantasy. So when my parents suggested I build something on their property, I thought, why not? You'll always have a place here, my mom said. This is your home too, sweetheart. And I believed her. Hi, I'm Rachel. I'm 33. I work as a veterinary tech in Flagstaff. Not exactly a billionaire's salary, but I make enough to live and save, barely. I'm single, no kids, no wild spending habits. I just wanted a place of my own. A space where I could put up fairy lights, adopt another rescue cat, and not hear someone else's bathroom habits through paper-thin apartment walls. I poured everything into that guest house. Weekends. Evenings. I met with contractors on my lunch breaks. I picked out the tiles, the fixtures, even the cabinet handles. I painted the walls myself. A dusty blue in the bedroom, a warm cream in the kitchen. I had a Pinterest board, okay? I imagined myself making coffee there in the mornings, sitting on the tiny porch with a book. It wasn't just a structure, it was a new beginning. And then, it was finished. The paint had dried. The appliances were in. The electricity was hooked up. My things were packed. I had just said goodbye to my rental and was ready to move in the next morning. That's when my dad handed me a duffel bag and said 6 words that still feel like a punch to the throat. Your sister needs it more than you. No warning. No conversation. Just that. I thought he was joking. He wasn't. I looked at my mom. She gave me that tired, stretched thin smile she always uses when she knows she's done something awful but wants credit for being calm. You'll figure it out, Ratch, she said. You're young. No husband. No babies. You'll land on your feet. But Amanda, she's starting her family. She needs stability. Amanda. Of course. The golden child. Married at 25. Pregnant at 28. Now expecting baby number 2 and somehow still living rent-free while posting Instagram stories about the grind. She was standing behind them, cradling her belly like a prop. Didn't even try to look sorry. I mean, you weren't paying rent or anything, she said with a shrug. I laughed. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was so absurd I didn't know what else to do. I paid for that house. Every beam. Every pipe. Every square foot. I didn't just contribute, I built it. And now they were acting like I'd been squatting on their land and stealing air. I wanted to scream. To yell. To remind them that it was my money, my labor, my plan. But instead I just walked away. I didn't cry. Didn't beg. Didn't ask for a compromise. I picked up my keys, said nothing, and drove away. I think that threw them more than anything. They were expecting drama, I think. Hoping I'd fight for it. Give them a chance to justify themselves. But I didn't give them that. Instead, I went silent. I moved in with a friend temporarily. Got a storage unit. Focused on work. Cut off contact, not loudly, not dramatically. I just stopped answering. No texts. No Sunday dinners. No Happy Mother's Day flowers. I wasn't being petty. I was being done. And here's the funny part, deep down, I knew this was coming. Not the exact moment. Not those words. But the shift? I'd felt it. See, near the end of construction, my dad took over the final stages to save money. He replaced my licensed contractors with some guy from church who used to be an electrician, and his old buddy Ray who knows plumbing stuff. You can imagine how thrilled I was. Rachel, you worry too much, Dad said. These guys are solid. Why waste money on fancy labor? I tried to argue. He ignored me. So I stepped back. Let him do it his way. After all, I thought I'd be the one living there. If something went wrong, I'd deal with it. But then it wasn't my problem anymore. 1 week later, the calls started. First my mom. Ignored. Then Amanda. Deleted without listening. Then Dad. 6 missed calls. The voicemail from Mom was, well, let's just say it made my day. Rachel, she said, her voice tight. We have a bit of a situation. The plumbing's leaking into the drywall. The electricity keeps cutting out. And there's some kind of smell, like mold, maybe worse. Amanda hasn't even been able to move in yet. We need to talk. I played it again. And then I laughed. Not because I sabotaged anything. I didn't. Not because I was happy they were struggling. I wasn't, not exactly. But because they had done this to themselves. They cut me out. Told me I didn't matter. And now the house I built, the one they stole, was literally falling apart. I didn't reply. Not out of spite. Not because I wanted revenge. But because, for the first time in a long time, it wasn't my problem. It wasn't just about the guest house. It never was. It was about everything that came before it. Every quiet moment I told myself to just be grateful, to not cause waves, to be the easy daughter. All the years I spent trying to earn a seat at a table that was already set for someone else. Deep down I knew. I always knew. My family never treated me the way they treated Amanda. But I convinced myself that if I worked hard enough, stayed helpful enough, made myself useful enough, they'd finally see me as just as important. Instead, I built a home. And the second it was finished, they handed it to her like I was nothing more than a contractor who overstayed her welcome. I turned off my phone and let the memories come. It started when we were kids. Amanda was the baby. That fact alone seemed to give her full immunity from consequences. If something went wrong, I was blamed. If we fought, it was my fault. If she lied, they believed her. Rachel, you're older, Mom used to say, like that erased everything. You have to set the example. Translation: Amanda gets to make mistakes. You get to clean them up. And I did. Every time. She lost her phone? I helped her find it. Lost her wallet? I drove across town to bring it to her. She once left her passport at a gas station on the way to a school trip, and guess who skipped work to recover it? Yeah, that was me. She crashed my car in college. Told my parents it was my fault. I wasn't even in the vehicle. They still believed her. And she never, not once, thanked me. Not when I covered for her skipping class. Not when I bailed her out of a rent situation she caused. Not when I gave her my laptop so she wouldn't fail a semester. Nothing. Just this blank, unbothered entitlement that made my skin crawl. But the day I really saw how far it went was the summer before college. I had a part-time job at a bookstore, saving for a used car. My parents had promised to match whatever I saved. I worked every shift I could, skipped spending, skipped outings, ate ramen like it was a food group. 2 weeks before I was set to buy the car, Amanda totaled hers. Not a fender bender. She ran a red light texting. The car was done. I came home the next day to find out my parents had used my savings to buy her a new one. She needs it more, sweetheart, Mom had said. You'll be at school soon, but Amanda still needs to get around. They didn't even ask. And when I dared say I was upset, my dad looked at me like I'd kicked a puppy. We're a family, Rachel. You'll understand when you're older. I do understand. Just not the way he thinks. That was the first time I started pulling away. I didn't cut them off, I still held on to hope. I wanted to believe that someday they'd choose me. So when they suggested building the guest house, it felt like a breakthrough. A win. Something that was mine. And I fell for it. My phone buzzed again, yanking me back. Another call. I finally picked up. It was my dad. Voice tight. Annoyed. Rachel, he said. What's going on with the guest house? What do you mean? You know what I mean. He lowered his voice like he thought someone might be listening. Amanda can't move in. The plumbing's leaking into the drywall. The power's out half the time. And there's this smell. I had to press my lips together to keep from laughing. Sounds like you should call a contractor. There was a pause. Look, he said, trying to sound calm. If something happened, if you forgot to finish something, you need to tell me now. I sat back. I didn't forget anything, Dad. You're the one who brought in your buddy Jim to wrap things up and save a few bucks. I told you not to. Another pause. He didn't expect me to push back. You know we don't have the money to fix this right now, he finally said. There it was. The real reason he was calling. They thought they could guilt me into coming back. Cleaning up their mess. I closed my eyes. I'm sorry, Dad. But that's not my problem. Silence. Then, Rachel, don't be like this. I didn't say anything. You can't just turn your back on your family. I gripped the phone tighter. No. You turned your back on me. I gave you everything. And I'm done. I hung up. The calls didn't stop. Mom. Dad. Amanda. Some were angry. Some pretended to be worried. A few had this fake sweet tone, like they were playing the victim. I ignored every single one. Then it changed. I started getting messages from other relatives. At first it was just cousins. Then an aunt. Then my Uncle Steve. Finally, my grandmother. Rachel, honey, your mom says you left without warning and the house is falling apart. What happened? Of course. They weren't just mad. They were embarrassed. They told everyone about Rachel's amazing little guest house, and how Amanda was going to move in and get a fresh start. And now? It was a disaster. And they needed someone to blame. I felt the anger rise. But I didn't answer. They wanted me to blow up. To storm in and fix everything while they cried to relatives about how I'd abandoned them. But I didn't. Because for once, I wasn't the one losing. And they knew it. I knew exactly what was happening. My parents weren't just calling me anymore. They were calling everyone else. Getting their version of the story out before I could say a word. It was textbook damage control. Rachel abandoned us after everything we did for her. She stormed out over nothing. She left the guest house unfinished and now look at the mess. We supported her for years, and this is how she repays us. Didn't matter that I paid for everything. Didn't matter that I spent weekends, nights, and every spare dollar making that place livable. In their version of events, I was ungrateful, irresponsible, selfish. And the worst part? Some people would believe them. Because that's what always happened. My parents had spent my entire life quietly rewriting the narrative. And they were good at it. They didn't scream. They didn't lie outright. They just nudged the story gently until they came out looking like the victims. I wasn't going to play. So I didn't respond. I didn't explain. I let the calls roll to voicemail. I let the texts stack up. I let the storm pass, quietly. And then, something changed. The messages from extended family stopped sounding concerned and started sounding curious. More skeptical. Like they were starting to notice the cracks in the perfect story. I had a pretty good idea why. Because my parents weren't just losing control of me anymore. They were losing control of the house. The house they stole. It started with a text from my Aunt Denise. Rachel, honey. I heard the guest house is unlivable. That there's mold spreading? What's going on? I stared at the message. Mold? That wasn't something they had mentioned in their voicemails. Plumbing, sure. Electrical, yes. But mold? If mold was spreading, that meant this wasn't a minor issue anymore. It was serious. Potentially toxic. The second message came from my cousin Josh. Hey, random question. Do your parents really not have the money to fix the guest house? I heard Amanda's fiancé is furious. Thought they were supposed to move in by now. My stomach dropped. So that's what this was really about. They'd promised Amanda and her fiancé the house. And now it was falling apart faster than they could explain it away. And the best part? For the first time, Amanda wasn't on their side either. I knew she'd call eventually. And when she did, she didn't even try to play nice. Rachel, what the hell is wrong with that house? She snapped as soon as I answered. I almost laughed. Why are you asking me? I said, calm as ever. Because, she huffed, Dad said you worked with the contractors. That you handled everything. That you made sure it was done right. I did, I cut in. Right up until Dad decided to save a few bucks and brought in his friend to finish it off. Maybe you should ask him. Silence. Then she added, more hesitantly this time. They said it's your fault the permits aren't going through. I blinked. What permits? Amanda groaned. The city permits. For the plumbing, the electrical. They said you didn't file the final paperwork. And now the city won't approve occupancy. I actually laughed. I couldn't help it. Because that's when it hit me. They had played themselves. They had assumed I'd be the one living there. That I'd be the one dealing with inspectors, finishing the permit process, signing off on compliance. But the second they kicked me out, they also kicked out the only person who knew how to get the job done legally. And now? They couldn't move in. Not without my help. That's not my problem, Amanda, I said, voice calm. She let out a sharp, humorless laugh. You think you're so smug, don't you? No, I said honestly. I just think you and Dad should have thought this through before stealing my house. Oh my God, Rachel, stop being so dramatic, she snapped. You weren't even paying rent. That was it. Amanda, I said very slowly, I paid for the entire house. Every board, every fixture, every bill. I didn't owe rent, because I owned it. Silence. Long. Uncomfortable. I could almost hear her thinking. The realization sinking in. The mental gymnastics struggling to keep up. She knew I was right. She also knew that if she had been the one to build something, pour her own money and time into it, only to have it ripped away by her parents and handed to me, she'd have burned the whole place down. But she couldn't admit that. So she defaulted to what she always did. She lashed out. Well, Mom and Dad are telling everyone you abandoned them, she said, voice sharp now. That you walked away and left a disaster behind. People are talking. I didn't flinch. Let them talk. She scoffed. You're so selfish. Goodbye, Amanda. And I hung up. I stared at my phone for a minute, waiting for the familiar guilt to creep in. It didn't come. Instead, peace. Because I knew what was coming next. The more they tried to spin the story, the more people would start asking questions. And they wouldn't like the answers. Because for years, I had been the responsible one. The fixer. The quiet helper in the background making things run. And now they were trying to make me the villain? People were going to notice the shift. And they were going to ask why. I didn't need to yell. Didn't need to send angry texts. Didn't need to defend myself. Because the truth? It has a way of slipping out through the cracks, especially when mold is involved. I didn't hear from Amanda after that call. Not for a few days, at least. But I knew that didn't mean things had calmed down. In our family, silence never meant peace. Silence meant they were scrambling. And someone, probably Amanda, was trying to find a way to fix the mess without admitting they'd made one. Good luck with that. They messed up. And I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of being the first to call. So I waited. And just like I expected, the calls started rolling in again, only this time, it wasn't just my parents. First, it was a random uncle I hadn't spoken to in years. Then an older cousin from Oregon I barely remembered. And then, my grandmother. That's when I knew things had really escalated. Because my grandmother was the last person my parents wanted involved. She's sharp. No nonsense. Immune to guilt trips. If she was calling me, it meant she'd already heard their version of the story, and had questions. I picked up. Rachel, sweetheart, she said. Her voice was warm but firm. I just had a very interesting conversation with your mother. I smiled to myself. Let me guess, I said. She told you I abandoned the family and left a trail of destruction behind me? Something like that, she replied, dry as sandpaper. I could already hear the skepticism in her tone. But I've known you a long time, and that story didn't sound quite right. I exhaled slowly. What exactly did she say? That you stormed off over a misunderstanding. Left the guest house half finished. And now poor Amanda and her fiancé have nowhere to live. Her voice tightened slightly. Oh, and of course, she and your father are simply heartbroken that you've turned your back on the family. I let out a short laugh. Did she happen to mention that I paid for the entire house? Pause. Then, no. I don't believe she did. Of course not. So what really happened? Grandma asked. And for the first time, I told someone the full story. How my parents had encouraged me to build the guest house. How they'd called it an investment in my future. How I had poured my savings, my time, my weekends into making it real. How I had picked out every detail, from the flooring to the hardware, because it was supposed to be mine. And how, the moment it was finished, they handed it over to Amanda. Like it was always the plan. My grandmother didn't interrupt me once. When I finished, she was silent for a long measured breath. Then she said, "That's low." "Yeah," I muttered. "And let me guess," she continued, her voice dry again, "they thought you'd come crawling back the minute things started falling apart?" Bingo. Another pause. Then she said something I didn't expect. "You should come to Sunday dinner." I blinked. "What?" "Everyone's going to be there," she said, a little amusement creeping into her voice. "I think it's time you let them all hear your side of the story." I hesitated. It wasn't fear. I wasn't afraid of my parents anymore. But airing the truth in front of the whole family? That was a different kind of vulnerability. "Grandma, I don't know if I want to stir the pot." "I'm not saying start a fight," she cut in. "I'm saying let them dig their own hole." I considered it. Then I smiled. "Okay," I said. "I'll be there." I showed up 10 minutes late on purpose. The moment I walked in, the shift in the room was almost physical. People looked at me. Curious. Tense. Some glanced away. Others gave me small, knowing nods, like they already knew the truth. Amanda sat tight-lipped beside my parents. Arms crossed. Eyes down. Mom forced a smile. "Oh, Rachel. You actually came." "Yeah," I said, taking a seat. I didn't add surprised, but the implication was loud. Dinner started awkwardly. Small talk. Too much silverware clinking. Tension so thick you could have buttered bread with it. And then, just as we were finishing up, my grandmother set down her glass, folded her hands, and said, "So Amanda, how's the new house coming along?" Silence. Amanda's jaw clenched. My dad jumped in. Still dealing with a few small issues. "Oh." Grandma raised an eyebrow. "What kind of issues?" Amanda shot him a warning look, but he cleared his throat. "Nothing major. Just some plumbing and electrical stuff. Minor setbacks." Minor setbacks? I almost choked on my drink. Grandma turned to me. "Rachel dear, didn't you handle the construction on that house?" Every head turned. I took a slow sip before answering. "I did. Right up until Dad decided to bring in a cheaper option behind my back. I told him it was a bad idea, but hey, what do I know?" The silence that followed was so dense it could have shattered glass. Amanda's face went crimson. Mom's smile twitched like a glitching robot. Dad looked ready to self-combust. But they couldn't argue. Not without outing themselves. And the room? It turned. My aunt leaned over to whisper to her daughter. My uncle muttered, "Unbelievable." My cousin raised his eyebrows like everything had just clicked into place. That was it. That was the moment my parents lost control of the narrative. Because now it wasn't just me saying it. It wasn't just a voicemail or a text. It was them, sitting there silent while the truth stood in the middle of the room like a neon sign. I didn't yell. Didn't cry. Didn't throw plates or demand apologies. I just let it sit there. And that was enough. They didn't call me after that. Neither did Amanda. I didn't expect them to. They were too busy scrambling, trying to salvage what was left of their version of the story. But it was too late. The cracks were visible now. And I left that dinner feeling lighter than I had in months. Not because I won, but because, for the first time, I didn't feel like I'd lost. I never got an apology. Not that I expected one. My family doesn't do apologies. They do silence. They do let's just move on, like nothing happened. But I didn't need an apology. Because the guest house? It may be sitting there full of mold and bad decisions, but it taught me something they never did. That my worth was never measured by how much I could fix. I'm done being the responsible one. Done cleaning up other people's messes. And done pretending that loyalty means letting yourself be walked on. They built the lie. I just stopped holding the foundation. If this story hit a little too close to home, you're not alone. Let me know what you would have done in my place down in the comments. I read every one. And hey, if you liked the story, hit the like button, subscribe, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for watching. And remember, sometimes walking away is the most powerful thing you can do.